So I wanted to welcome up on the stage today Bonnie Shetler. Bonnie is our chairperson for the Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities Steering Committee. Bonnie has been an incredible chairperson for us and has kept us going throughout this. And she does deserve a big hand. So I suspect that many of you here kind of know what the partnership is about, but I bet you there's a whole lot that don't. So we're going to have a conversation with Bonnie and ask her some questions about the partnership. So to get us started, Bonnie, what is the partnership?
Well, the partnership is basically a collaboration of, right now, about 10 different organizations represented by 18 to 20 people who have been working together for 2 years now to find ways that we can promote age-friendly communities throughout Larimer County. And it's the collaborative piece that's really been the key to making this work. And I actually do deserve your applause because this is a hell of a group. We started a couple of years ago in the spring of 2013 when actually your predecessor, Ruth Long, who's here with us today, and a couple of us who were representing the Foundation on Aging at the time, brought together a group of folks with the idea that we might follow up on a summit that we had done in 2010, an Aging Summit. And if you know anything about working with leadership, it takes a while for everybody to kind of get on the same page. But we met for a couple of months. Probably by July, I think it was, we finally agreed at least on what the mission of this event would be. And the mission would be to do whatever we did, that it would promote the idea of age-friendly communities throughout Larimer County. And we also accomplished agreeing on a name, the partnership. And the partnership reflecting the fact that it is a partnership. It's not any one entity pulling this off. We never could have done it without the resources of everybody who came to that group. And by July, what had been a group of 10 was now a group of more like 18. When people started hearing about this movement, the timing just seems right. People started showing up and wanting to participate and contribute their services. So while we're still floundering about what to do about this summit and what it would look like, we had the opportunity to apply for the N4A grant that Sandy talked about earlier. And much to our surprise, actually, we got it, along with 5 other communities in the country, and shelved the idea of a summit because these guys think I'm a taskmaster, you should try working for N4A. They had a very specific strategic plan that we had to follow, the goal being the same as our goal, which was to promote age-friendly communities, but to do it in a way that brought an even broader cross-section of stakeholders together. And they put us through the paces, and what they wanted us to do was identify the priority areas that we felt were important, and you've heard these priorities are already today. In Larimer County, we determined from what had gone on before in terms of community conversations and surveys that transportation was numero uno. No matter where you looked at that, it's numero uno. Housing, not just affordable housing, but housing that's appropriate to people who like to live in place and age in that housing. Wellness, any of you who live in this county know that we are not hurting for medical resources. But in terms of promoting wellness activities, that we felt needed a lot more attention. And then just the whole idea of the attitude, the culture of aging, how we as a community look at our elders and how that influences what we're willing to support in terms of policies that affect their quality of life. So we had to identify stakeholders who could bring something to the table in each of those areas, and with N4A's help, put on a workshop in February of 2014 with 40 of those stakeholders. They really wanted us to do 20 because they're paying for it, but we talked them into 40. And to come together to talk about all those issues. So with Martine's help and the Center for Public Deliberation and his students, we had folks at roundtables from housing and from transportation and from the medical community all talking about each of those issues, because if you really think about it, they're not independent issues. They're all interrelated. And out of that, we got a number of additional people who were willing to work with us on at least one priority group serving those 4 areas. And those priority groups started meeting right away. And the mission, the assignment to the priority group is you have to come up with some goals that are, now that you're on board and you know this community and you know how we work with transportation and what the needs are and what the possibilities are, each group had to come up with some long-term goals that were relevant to Larimer County, that could work in Larimer County, reasonable, and short-term goals, and then to identify a project that was short-term, achievable, had a high probability of success, and could be accomplished by a self-directed team of volunteers composed primarily, although not necessarily entirely, of Boomers retirees. And by August, or July actually, each of those 4 priority groups had identified a project, had actually, with the help of a couple of our committee members, Kay Hood, Martha Conant, who agreed to serve as sort of volunteer coordinators, really helpful in getting the right people on board for each of those projects. Then N4A came back to town and provided us with an outside expert and trained all of those volunteers in one day on the whole concept of how you work as a self-directed volunteer team. So the projects got kind of started that day under the framework of this new way of looking at and using volunteers. And by fall, we knew that all of these projects would likely be completed by spring of this year, and seemed like a good time to dust off our summit idea and bring it back out and plan to meet with you after we've actually had more experience under our belt.
So, Bonnie, tell us a little bit more about the self-directed volunteer teams and some of the projects that they were involved in.
Well, I do want to direct you, I don't know if any of you have taken a look at the display tables, but each of the volunteer teams have put up some information that kind of reflects the projects they were involved in and the reports or the outcome of those projects. But the transportation team worked with Fort Collins Parks and Rec and the Senior Center to put on 2 separate days of travel training where seniors could start here at the center, get a bus, get to the Max, end up having lunch in Old Town, always a big draw, and then back to the Senior Center. And they did it with a city travel trainer on board who could explain the bus system to them and answer any questions they might have about how to use it. The wellness group did a walkability study. They surveyed over 300 residents of Larimer County, throughout Larimer County, to try and find out what kinds of things in their particular neighborhoods get in the way of walking and what kinds of incentives there are in their particular neighborhoods. And they also generated a report of those results, which is, you can find it on the Foundation on Aging website. I don't know if they have a copy of it here, but a report of the results of that survey. The housing people actually accomplished 2 things. The self-directed team took it upon themselves to do a kind of a literature search, but also kind of a research of what kinds of alternative housing options were other communities using successfully or not successfully. So they looked at co-housing strategies. They looked at the village-to-village concept. They looked at the tiny house concept. And I think there are about 5 different options that they researched and wrote up in terms of who's doing it successfully, who are good people to talk to about doing it. But I do want to finish that part of it. Who did I miss? Oh, and the other thing that the housing priority group did is raise the money to fund the housing scan that you'll be hearing about this afternoon, which was an amazing accomplishment. And then there's so there were 3 groups, 3 projects, And then there's a culture of aging. The group that's clearly overachievers came up with actually 2 projects.
Because we're in that group.
Yes. She's the chair, Alan Heilman's the co-chair, and I'm in the group. But that group, the first thing they did was they had like 6 weeks to prepare a candidates forum in anticipation of the November election for a county commissioner's position and a couple of state legislative seats, and did an amazing job in 6 weeks of getting all the candidates, even one I understand who was running unopposed showed up, to consider questions that had been submitted ahead of time, answer those questions, and then have a kind of a meal like this with the senior attendees to answer questions directly. And then the other one was a group of seniors who themselves put together a team of seniors who write. And we worked with the Coloradoan to establish a monthly series of articles where these seniors who write, who are experienced writers, were willing to share their personal experiences about some aspect of just growing older in this community. And that is ongoing in that the Coloradoan is committed to doing these articles till the end of the year. If people aren't reading it, they'll probably stop. But if they're reading it, they'll keep it going. But even if they stop, it was a good try.
So where do we go from here?
If I only have 2 minutes, I'll tell you. By the way, we decided to spare you the PowerPoint and just do scenes from Larimer County while we spoke, if you're curious where these are coming from. I think I'll skip the details because each of the priority groups has sat down and has explored some ideas about where they'd like to take these projects how they'd like to take them to the next level. But they haven't actually put pen to paper yet, because what we're really hoping today is that we can interest a good share of you. We have an amazing cross-section of folks, stakeholders in this room. I mean, we are just so pleased with the composition of this group today. And the promise it offers of pulling you on board to help actually form that next level of action based on what we've accomplished so far. And I'm not going to actually spare you the details of ideas that have been expressed, except to say that each group has come up with at least one good project based on the projects that have been accomplished, except for the culture of aging, which has come up with 4 good ideas.
Do you have any final thoughts on this, Bonnie, or?
2 minutes. Well, I did want to share, I was born in 1946. I want to share just a personal story in terms of my personal investment. I've got a professional interest in how things turn out here, but 1946, first year of the baby boomers. I mean, imagine just a line just of my 1946 cohorts moving forward into our 70s, and imagine the lines behind us of that boomer generation we're talking about, and we've got a bunch of us moving into that age group. When I was in high school, undergraduate school, my grandmother was in her 60s, and everyone who in the family who would have been older than she was gone. I mean, the concept even that you would live into your 70s, let alone be healthy and still want to stay engaged. My husband and I have lived in the same house for 40 years in a very rural part of the county, up in the foothills, and not flood, not fire, not blizzards, wind, rain, snow, nothing has pried us out of there in 40 years. And that goes for a number of our neighbors who've lived there even longer. But the one thing we know will pry us out of there is our old age. That when we get to the point where we can no longer manage the physical demands of being in that kind of an environment, we're going to have to move to town. It's the only thing that'll get us to do it. And we've started to have that discussion. What do we want? Okay, how can we make that part of our life still worth looking forward to? And we've actually built up a vision that we would go to more plays, take more classes, volunteer a little bit more because you'd be more aware of what the needs are in the community and how we can help with that. We'd want to find a home that was, as people have discussed, simple to manage, but also accessible to all these things we still want to be a part of. My worst vision well, my worst vision of growing old and frail is that I would develop some kind of chronic illness so serious that it would define my life and who I was. That's to me is one of the hardest. But the second worst vision is that I would live out my life in isolation from this really thriving, active community because I couldn't get to where I wanted to go, and because it was just too hard to make my presence known, and because I had become invisible to the rest of the community. For me, that's the worst case scenario. But I have great hopes that we, particularly since there's so many of us, you can't begin to ignore us. And we wouldn't let you do it if you tried. And so I really have great hopes that that vision for my generation is not going to be the norm.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Imagine.
So as Bonnie said, there's lots of projects for everyone to get involved in. We're here to celebrate. This has been an amazing process. It's happened quickly, but it could only have been done with the enthusiasm of this community. This is an amazing place to live. As a new person here, only 2 years, I can't tell you, living in a community that is very intentional about its planning shows. And this room full of people shows how committed we are. So we know that this is not the end. This is not the beginning. This is one of the steps that we're taking towards livable communities for all. So thank you, Bonnie.